Have you got this being live streamed? That means you will be recorded.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive, 28th of November 2023. My name is Councillor Paul Follows, and I'm Leader of the Council and Chairman of the Executive. Ben, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Leader. There are no apologies for absence this evening.
And indeed, everybody is here. Item 2, minutes of the meeting on the 31st of October. Members, can I have your agreement to approve the minutes? Thank you all. Declarations of interest. Ben, any received before the meeting?
There were none.
And any from the floor? No. Questions from members of the public, Ben?
There are no questions from the members of the public this evening.
Item 5, questions from members. I believe that we have Councillor David Beeman on the Zoom with a question. Councillor Beeman, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Leader. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, David.
It's unstable, unfortunately, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can,
Right,
David.
thank you. Okay, my question is okay, thank you. Right, my question is quite short.
Councillor Beeman, if you are still with us, I'd advise you turn
Whilst
your video off.
accepting the collaboration programme with Guildford Borough Council yielding financial benefits, sorry?
I would just advise you turn your video off so that it doesn't keep offering.
It's off.
Go for it, David.
Well, I'll start again. Whilst accepting of the collaboration programme with Guildford Borough Council yielded financial benefits for both authorities, before members of either authority can agree to undertake any studies of the operational potential and the financial saving that might exist for further collaboration, could all members receive a review of the operation of the joint management team to date, given increased workload now on all members of the MT? Also, would it not be better for any further studies of any further collaboration to wait the appointment of a new chief executive so that the full account can be taken of any view input they might have? Thank you.
I believe Councillor Keel is going to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Beeman, for your question. As you have noted, the collaboration with Guildford Borough Council has already yielded financial benefits for both authorities. In a time where all local authorities, Waverley included, face significant financial challenges, those benefits are much needed and very welcome. Whenever a new management structure is put in place, it's good practice to monitor its effectiveness, seek feedback from members of the team and others, and to look at whether any adjustments might be needed to ensure it's functioning as planned. Officers have confirmed to me that this is the approach being taken with regards to the joint management team for Waverley and Guildford. I also note that the published risk register for the collaboration, which is kept under review by the Waverley and Guildford Joint Governance Committee, comprised of councillors from both authorities, says that the JMT structure will be kept under review. That commitment to keeping the structure under review is just one of a number of ongoing and future mitigating actions to reduce risks relating to the collaboration between the two authorities. In terms of whether further studies of how we could collaborate going forward should await the momentum now. We have a clear policy direction with a democratic mandate, and the report on our agenda this evening gives us a framework for how we move ahead, and in particular where we focus our attention on the options we have. Thank you.
And thank you, David. We'll probably counting on some of those themes as we go. One sec.
Good evening, Leader, and apologies, the chamber was muted while Councillor Keel was speaking. So for the benefit of members of the public at home, if you could kindly read it again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Beaman, for your question. As you've noted, the collaboration with Guildford Borough Council has already yielded financial benefits for both authorities. In a time where all local authorities, Waverley included, face significant financial challenges, those benefits are much needed and very welcome. Whenever a new management structure is put in place, it is good practice to monitor its effectiveness, seek feedback from members of the team and others, and to look at whether any adjustments might be needed to ensure that it's functioning as planned. Officers have confirmed to me that this is the approach being taken with regards to the joint management team for Waverley and Guildford. I also note that the published risk register for the collaboration, which is kept under review by the Waverley and Guildford Joint Governance Committee, comprised of councillors from both authorities, says that the JMT structure will be kept under review. That commitment to keeping the structure under review is just one of a number of ongoing and future mitigating actions to reduce risks relating to the collaboration between the two authorities. In terms of whether further studies of how we should collaborate going forward should await the appointment of a new chief executive, I do not think that they should. As set out within this evening's executive report, the intention is to commence the work of studying the options relating to staff and office locations, not to conclude straight away what should be done. Putting the work on pause or not commencing with it would cause significant unnecessary delay further down the line. The input of our future chief executive will of course be important, but we don't depend on that input to maintain momentum now. We have a clear policy direction with a democratic mandate, and the report on our agenda this evening gives us a framework for how we move ahead, and in particular where we focus our attention on the options we have. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Keel, for repeating that. I stress that it does not set a precedent for everybody to say the exact same thing twice, otherwise we will be here for some time. It won't stop some people, I know. Item 6, which is updates from myself and the rest of the executive. So before I start, I'm very pleased to report that we have had a significant number of candidates for the joint chief executive vacancy, and the closing date for applications was last Friday. We've actually had so much interest that we have to hold a shortlisting committee in the first instance, which sits tomorrow, and there'll be interviews for candidates on the shortlist the following week. So actually, it's actually very good news. We've had a very good batch of candidates, and I'm now actually quite buoyant that we will have some options into the new year. So obviously, we'll keep councillors updated on that, and the joint appointments committee, which will review will conduct the interviews and then make a recommendation to council, will sit in due course. At that point, I will hand over to Councillor Clark, who's next.
Thank you, Leader. My update this evening is more of a personal update, just to announce that with a mixture of sadness and euphoria, that this will be my last executive, because for medical reasons, I'm stepping down from the executive at the end of December. Just a few words about my experience with this group of people on the executive, who come from a very mixed background: world of finance, teaching, parliament. I could go on. They are, or you are, a disparate bunch of people with various colours, yellows, greens, etc. But nevertheless, we have all coalesced well and simply got on with the business. We've been accused on certain occasions of being reckless. Even a casino council, I think, was the word that the Conservatives, the opposition once used. But I think we are a progressive council. We get on with things. We don't sit back and wait for the government because we could be sitting there forever. I remember, just finally, I remember when John Ward said to me, "Would you like to be the deputy leader after Paul Follows?" And he said to me, "He's a hard act to follow." And I said, "Yes, I can't follow a single word of it." On a more serious note, another person who's stepping back from Waverley for medical reasons, of course, is Tom. And I'd like to thank Tom for his very few words, but always of wisdom. Tom only speaks when he's got something to say, or something else has been said that shouldn't have been said. So thank you to Tom and thank you to Paul. And I've picked up the knack of following you.
And I will certainly say some more at the end once I've been through the rest of the executive, but thank you, Peter. I'll move now to Councillor Fairclough.
Thank you, Leader. As I'm sure the executive is more than aware, there's an extremely complicated environmental issue currently in Bramley. One whose almost certain cause is now identified thanks to the efforts of Waverley officers. The issue is still evolving and there is now a multi-agency approach to it, one coordinated by Waverley officer Jeanette Guy, a Waverley officer who, in my opinion, is going above and beyond her duty on this. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank Jeanette personally and on behalf of the executive, and also, I'm sure, on behalf of all Bramley residents and councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, very much. Here. Councillor Keele.
Nothing from me. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. I was sorry to hear that Councillor Clark's going to be leaving us. On an uncharacteristically serious note, he'll be missed by me and I think by everybody. And I'm, with mixed emotions, look forward to working with those who'll be stepping into his shoes. As you'd expect, the finance team have been scouring the Chancellor's autumn statement for any kind of basic information you'd expect local authorities like us to be given in order to plan ahead, and sadly scouring in vain as usual. Underpinning what the Chancellor did announce was a £19.1 billion real terms cut in public spending as unfunded cost inflation decelerates but still persists. But there was a deafening silence on so much else, including the funding settlement controlled by the centre that local authorities like us need to balance our budgets next year and beyond. And that's something I'll be returning to when I introduce the reports in sections 9 and 10 of the agenda later. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Mirrlees.
Thank you, Leader. A quick update on the Edge. We now have an agreed memorandum of association with Surrey County Council and have an arrangement from WHSA to manage the sports hall bookings ready to start. The last of the legal elements now need to be finalised, and we're hopeful that community use is in place by early December. And just one on the museum. Pre-construction activities are now underway and progressing well. We had the digital survey on the 8th of November, and we are waiting for those results. We will have an introductory talk by the lead consultant for historic buildings and conservation the week commencing the 5th of February for residents and local councillors. And the same talk will be given to the museum staff, volunteers and friends of the museum. It will set out the overall programme and the implementation of essential conservation works to maintain the building in perpetuity for the whole community to enjoy. The museum is also working on an exhibition on Georgian buildings to launch at the same time. And this will be followed by a series of public talks and demonstrations where the public can take part in hands-on activities with brick making and learning about the conservation techniques and materials. There will be a dedicated project web page on the museum, hosted by the Farnham Maltings, with regular updates, photos, and everything else that they would need. We are still pursuing extra funding, though through the National Lottery and other relevant charities. The lead consultant, Graham Avery, and work partner, Emma Simpson, are at present working on the brickwork at Hampton Palace. And what was really interesting about our discussion with him was the fact that he thinks, and he said, you don't realise how amazing Wilmer House is. He is about to go off to Macedonia to work on a project there. He worked on one in Israel. They're working at Hampton Palace at the moment. I mean, he's a major, major conservationist. And he said, of all the things I've been involved in, I have to tell you that Wilmer House is the best. It's the most interesting and the one that I'm most keen to do the work on. And he said, you really do have a really important, rare building sitting on your high street, and that's for the borough. So just wanted to let you know. So that's rather interesting for us all to recognise how important it is. So that's our updates. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's so good that that project is really moving forward now. I think we've all been looking forward to that one, getting to this stage for a little while. It's great for everybody. So thank you, Kiko. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I'd like to add my thanks to the retiring Chief Executive and Deputy Leader. I very much appreciate all the very constructive and positive work that I've had with both of you. And I think whatever you do next will greatly benefit from all that, from your commitment and your constructive and intelligent approach. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to mention Andrew Smith, who I gather is retiring at the end of the, or moving on at the end of the year to Horsham. And I'd really like to thank him for the work that he's been doing. I don't have any portfolio holder reports to make today, although I'll be speaking on a number of items later.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I've now got Councillor Townsend. Sorry, no, my apologies, I can't read. Councillor Rivers first.
That's perfectly all right, Leader. It's good for a leader not to be able to read. But, Councillor Clark, yes, well, you'll be no doubt heckling us from the benches at the back. So it's only a temporary movement, I'm sure. Well, no, it's permanent movement, but great. So we will listen out for you. Beyond that, and the thought that you will now have a bit more time to join us on Thursday at the Landlord Services Advisory Board, to which you are welcome by any virtual means you wish to use. That would be good for everybody too. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, and I just would also like to thank Peter for all of his hard work, and it's with deep regret that I see you move to the back benches. And you know, we will miss your turn of phrase in executive briefings, but I'm sure you'll still retain that sense of humour and from the back benches, and perhaps heckle us a little bit. So thank you. The other announcement I had to make was that I'm really pleased to be able to say that the High Court has upheld our decision to adopt Local Plan Part 2. And the claim for the statutory review has been dismissed, and the claimants have not sought permission to appeal. I'd like to thank everybody that's been working so hard on this. It has taken an awful lot of officer time. I'd like to thank Cornerstone's barristers and Wayne Beglam, and also Jack Barber, who represented us in the High Court and has been representing us as well on Local Plan Part 2 as well. And I'd also like to thank officers. In particular, I'd like to thank Andrew Longley, Matthew Ellis and Catherine Dove, who's really worked hard on all of the preparation. It's a big job to produce all the papers and everything for the local plan, and also to be agile when you're up in the High Court as well, to be able to respond to questions and queries as well as they arise. So thank you to all of them. So now we can focus, or the planning policy team can focus, obviously, on the adoption of Local Plan Part 2 and fully implementing the policies, and also the new local plan, and the amount of work, a huge amount of work that we need to do on that. Another small thing, I'd just like to thank Waverley and officers as well for their help in setting up the new hospital hopper for Cranley and the surrounding villages, which launches on the 4th of December. I'm thrilled about this because I've been working on it for some time, and I'd like to just thank officers for their help, Jane Todd in particular. So hopefully it will be a really good service that's offered to the Cranley residents, door to door to the hospital, and I hope lots of them use it. Thank you, Leader.
And whilst I hope there is not an endemic of need for the use of the hospital hopper in Cranley, indeed, no, particularly for Cranley and areas that are slightly disconnected from public transport, it's absolutely essential. And I will just echo my thanks to the planning policy team and everybody who supported in the LPP2 challenge. That's fantastic news. And I'm deeply surprised to get that news before Christmas, but like you, was very pleased this morning when we found out. I will now move on to conclude with Councillor Williams.
Yeah, nothing by way of an update, not even a side swipe at the Chancellor of the Exchequer, following by the precedent set by my colleague, Councillor Merriweather. Tempting though that might be. However, I would like to add my personal thanks to Peter Clark. Peter will be enormously missed by the executive for his delightful sense of humour, but also his more serious contribution to our deliberations, sort of underpinning that delightful, humorous exterior that he's demonstrated. I think it's been a delight to have Peter on our sort of wide progressive executive, and I genuinely will miss Peter, and I'm sure, and I know everybody else will. So that's all I'd want to say. But it's the end of an era, Peter.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams, and I will just also give my thanks to Peter. Genuinely an honour to serve with you, Peter. I think it's been an excellent time. I mean, we've had a little bit of a requirement, I think, to have at least one Dower Scott on the executive, and with the departure of Andy MacLeod, we had to make sure that we were covered in some way. So, obviously, no, one of us has to always be a measured, balanced individual between the leader and the deputy leader, and it's usually the deputy, as is often the case. So, thank you, Peter. To just let everybody else, of course, know the arrangements between the Farnham residents and the Liberal Democrats are such that the deputy leadership will be held and continue to be held by the Farnham residents. I will make that announcement at the December 12/12 Council, and also the vacancy that will be filled that is left with Peter's departure. So I'll make those announcements at the next council. Right, moving then on to the agenda. Item 7, the recommendations from overview and scrutiny. There are 2 recommendations. The first, bear with me, I need to actually zoom in slightly on my very tiny screen. So the first recommendation from resources relates to the housing revenue account. And I'll read it. The committee resolved to express concern as to whether this project is employing correct methods of market valuation, whether a greater financial contingency is required, how cost overruns will be prevented, and adequate value for money is being attained. I was at that meeting. I saw absolutely no evidence presented by the committee as to why they thought that was an incorrect method of market valuation. I saw no alternative proposed by ONS, and I heard the relevant officer very clearly state why we use that particular valuation. So from the point of view of the executive, unless there's any other opinion in the room, I don't think that needs a response. And I would just ask ONS in future, if you're going to make that kind of comment, that it needs to be backed up with some kind of substance for us to actually review. Without that substance, I can't really make any further comment other than to defer to our expert officer who made the point at the time. Any other comments on that particular item? Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. Only to repeat my my wish that certain members of the ONS committee turned up for the training that was arranged for them.
Yes, that would have been a lot clearer, and it certainly would have prevented the individual from straying into exempt material as well. Councillor Townsend.
I also attended at ONS as well, and I do feel that perhaps there was a little bit of confusion on behalf of the members. So I think that I think we are sending round a briefing note to them, to all of the members of the ONS committee, and I think that that's then might clarify the position, because there did seem to be a broad amount of confusion about how the housing revenue account is run, and also about generally how properties are valued. And there was also an error as well that came forward, but that was exempt material anyway. Thank you.
I think it's that my other final comment on that one would be that if members are finding a subject confusing, requesting more information is entirely appropriate. Telling officers that they're wrong and should look again when they're coming from a position of not being an expert on the subject is inappropriate, and I think it's right for us to call that out. The only other item from overview and scrutiny is in regards to the item that's in exempt at the end of this agenda. I actually agree with the sentiment that they've expressed, and we'll be asking exec to consider an amendment to the same that they have put, and we'll update that as we go. Therefore, we move to probably the largest item of business on tonight's agenda, the Guildford and Waverley Transformation and Collaboration Report, which is with Councillor Keel to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. This paper sets out the next steps in our joint working with Guildford Borough Council, proposing that work commence on the options analyses that are required. At the outset, I'd like to thank our officers, in particular Robin Taylor and Yasmin Mackin, for their hard work and diligence in getting these papers prepared for our consideration. I would also like to note that Guildford Borough Council have passed their equivalent paper at their executive meeting on the 23rd of November. The report shows the progress made so far and the suggestions for next steps. The list of recommendations will allow officers to kickstart the next phase around options analyses for co-location and creating a single shared officer structure. Importantly, it also requests that the Overview and Scrutiny Committees provide scrutiny of the draft options appraisals before a final decision is taken. I'd like to start by restating our commitment to this collaboration. This is a positive step in our journey as two authorities working together for the benefits of both. As the reports detail, there has already been great gains in working in a more harmonised way. I'd also like to draw members' attention to the Vision's 5 principles in Appendix 1, which underline the direction of our partnership. That the two councils will continue to be accountable to their own residents, that the partnership will help to protect and enhance priority services in the face of critical local government funding challenge, that the partners will seek to do more together than they could do separately to respond to the climate emergency, that the councils will harmonise internal processes and external service delivery, except when there is a good reason not to, and that this partnership will form a stable basis for any future collaborative discussions. It is therefore a shared vision to do more where it is in the interests of both authorities. The councils will continue to be accountable to their own residents and retain separate democratic and legal entities. Working with another authority can allow us to achieve economies of scale that we cannot achieve alone and opens the door to opportunities. Our joint management team has not only saved us money as an authority, but it has also enabled the sharing of expertise across the two councils and has saved us time and effort. The climate emergency is one that this administration is taking very seriously, and by working with another authority that also has declared a climate emergency and shares our target to be carbon neutral by 2030, we can seek to do more together than we could ever achieve on our own. Another element which I wish to just touch upon is that of simultaneous decision-making. This will enhance the democratic process, allowing for the authorities' executives to meet together, listen to each other and debate ideas, and then take their own sovereign decisions. For all these reasons and those detailed in the comprehensive report, I commend this approach to you and ask that you support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keel. And just before I bring in the two speakers we have registered, I just want to also thank Robin, Yasmin, but also all the finance team for their input in making sure that we got to a point where we had money and revenue and capital to invest in this actual process. I think it's abundantly clear that there is absolutely no financial assistance coming from the government, and we need to look to ourselves and our colleagues in Guildford. But as Councillor Keel has articulated, this isn't just about the money, it is about more than that. And at that point, I'll bring in one of the first of the two speakers, Councillor Spence.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. There is a lot to commend itself in these papers in front of you, and I am broadly supportive of the programme as outlined by Councillor Keel. However, I have one major worry, and that lies in the wording of the programme's objectives on page 43 of your report. It says there that the principal objective is to bridge budget gaps by making savings. And then it goes on to list 5 other objectives, including deliver sustainable and resilient public services, and deliver carbon neutral operations by 2030 in both organizations. All of these 6 objectives are good ones, but I take issue with the bifurcation in the paper. The original vision statement that was agreed by us in July 2021 acknowledged that financial saving was a key driver of the collaboration, but there was no hierarchy of objectives. The statement, creating the scale of operation capable of jointly securing financial savings, sat equally along with maintain existing council priority services and seek to protect and improve non-carbon, non-statutory services. This has now changed with bridge budget gaps by making savings clearly taking precedence. I am worried that the desire to make savings, while important, will trump proposals to address the other objectives, regardless of their intrinsic merits or social value. And here I'd also note that the principal objective doesn't even mention efficiencies, it only says savings. By downgrading these other objectives, there is, in my opinion, a real danger that the collaboration will soon become nothing more than a money-saving exercise, rather than being the more holistic program for improving the well-being of our residents and environment that the original vision statement encapsulated. Prioritizing savings in this way will also make it a lot harder to deliver the cultural shift that is articulated in the strategic assumptions on page 44. Getting staff to understand how they fit in and feel ownership of the solutions and the change will, in my opinion, be immeasurably more difficult if the overriding prism of the programme is one of savings. I have the impression that the change in priority and emphasis may be driven by Guildford's financial position, but I still think it is a disappointing and unnecessary step back. So I hope that you will reflect whether removing the principal stroke other differentiation and just having the 6 objectives all of being equal worth will keep it in harmony with the original intent and vision of our collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spence. I'm going to go to the second speaker before I ask the executive to reply to both speakers. The second speaker is Councillor Hyman.
Through you, Leader, Councillor Hyman isn't online.
Then we won't be going to Councillor Hyman. In which case, do I have any speakers on from the executive? Otherwise, I will certainly reply a little. In terms of the mechanics of the report, Councillor Spence, where we've had these come to Guildford and then Waverley, it's not currently possible for me to modify the report without causing a little bit of a problematic issue in terms of the report structure. Where we are moving in time is to have certain meetings that run concurrently with Guildford and ideally maybe together when it comes to collaboration matters. So we'll be able to redress issues like that in the reporting. I actually agree with you. I think we do probably need to amend how that works. Although I cannot amend the report from the floor or even really add an extra recommendation to achieve this, I'm happy to commit now that at the first session where Guildford and Waverley's executive meet again informally, we will discuss that particular set of priorities and come to a conclusion, which I will then communicate to members. I don't disagree with you, though. We do need to make sure that we're looking at this beyond the financial, and certainly I'm sure others will comment on that. And if not, I certainly will at the end. I've got Councillor Williams to speak next.
Yeah, I very much see that and understand the financial imperative. And I think we do need to take account, as both Councillor Follows and Councillor Keel have pointed out, that the financial imperative is also part and parcel of a picture where there are opportunities that can be provided for both Guildford Guildford Borough Council and Waverley Borough Council. Though I think the financial imperatives probably would alone be sufficient in a climate where if we do nothing as a council, we are faced with a constant shrinkage in essential local services, being pushed back to deliver our statutory functions and nothing more. So in that sense, I mean, I do understand that the financial imperative is pretty critical here. But I do very much take the point that Councillor Spence makes that you know, that we should not be neglecting those opportunities. And I think it's right at this moment to send a shot across our bows in the way that a shot has been sent across our bows. Because, you know, when I meet, as I do on a regular basis with my opposite number in Guildford, and, you know, I do have regular meetings, regular conversations with Councillor George Potter as my opposite number in terms of environment, climate change issues. And, you know, we very much see that relationship between Waverley and Guildford as something which is positive, and that we can achieve something together that we cannot achieve separately. So I very much actually take the point that that Councillor Spence has made. I do think there is a clear financial imperative there, but actually writ very large on my agenda is actually to take advantage of the opportunities provided by more closer working of Waverley and Guildford Borough Councils. And it would be a sad day if we actually just set that to one side.
I think the original intention behind that section of the report is because there is either a reality of, or certainly a feeling of, existential threat on the financial side, and that's obviously felt slightly more keenly at Guildford, although I would stress is not something that we should just be flippant about here at Waverley either. The finance side of it is both an enabler and a barrier to anything else, and I think that's why it ended up in the sort of precedence that it's had. I will certainly be keen going forward to try and stress more the other things that we talk about all the time with the collaboration, which is about this being greater than the sum of its parts. And actually, and I try not to sound too almost naive when I say this, that the collaboration can actually be a vehicle for us to deliver more and deliver better against a backdrop of local government, which is trying to just do less and less and less because of all the cuts on the finance side. So for me, I don't think that emphasis is lost, but I do think it does. I think you're quite right to raise it, Councillor Spence. As Councillor Williams has said, it's a very reasonable point to make, and it's something that I think we should stress going forward, actually the non-financial aspects of this as much as we can. I've got several speakers, starting with Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. Well, I didn't count the words that Councillor Spence used, but if there were 750, I would say exactly the same 750 words. There is certainly survival, I think, is the word that in terms of financial outlook over the next few years, you can understand why there is this focus on the financial side, but there is that, to that extent, a danger that we lose sight of the other objectives. And to some extent, the other objectives, and I'm thinking now of doing things better together. And looking back at the business transformation programme that we've run here at Waverley, where we saved almost £1 million, we didn't do that just by cutting things. We did it by doing things better. And I think that's probably the most exciting part of the collaboration, is how do we do things better? And I think the public, there is a danger of the public thinking that all this is about is saving money. And because certainly the articles and press releases that we have noted in the media have focused on the savings. And I think there is the danger of the finance issues taking precedence, because it's going to get tougher, as we've heard, it's going to get tougher year on year without any support coming from anywhere else. So I'd just like to finish by saying I agree with every one of the 750 words that you used. Thank you.
This is where somebody goes and counts. I've got Councillor Townsend is next.
I'm not going to count, but I am going to thank Councillor Spence for drawing us back to our original objectives. And you know, again, within the executive, we've spoken about triple bottom line accounting and talked about financial, social and environmental. And I think those are the three key points that we need to refocus on and to reiterate again. And thank you for drawing us back to that. I think, you know, we have said before that we are a progressive council, as Councillor Clark said earlier as well. And, you know, and we are not frightened about collaboration. We don't want to be isolated. I know that isolation is an ideology that some people may have, but it's not one of this council. This council is proud to collaborate with Guildford. We're proud to be able to provide services, better services to our residents, and to look into that together, what we can achieve for our residents. And if we can do more together, perhaps in the co-location or on site, if we can do more together, then that is something we should have a real responsibility to do, whilst looking again about the environmental impacts of our actions as well. So I think that, you know, I think we've taken on board, it feels like we've taken on board what Councillor Spencer said, and it's been very welcome to draw us back to those three key points, which I know we all hold dear. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm sure if we ever do forget the financials somehow, a combination of Mark and the section 151 will probably jog our memories at some point. I have no doubt of that. I've got Councillor Merriweather and then Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Lady. Yeah, well, I suppose up to a point, but the, you know, we have to remember that funding and financials is about value. It's not just about price. And when I look at the collaboration, I do I recognise everything that Councillor Spence said, and I totally understand his concerns and sympathise them. But when we triage the challenges that we face, funding is always there as an issue that needs to be dealt with. But I do like to think that what we're talking about in terms of the collaboration is value, and it's about productivity. And I would even go so far as to suggest that we as a council, from what I can see, tend to understand a little bit more about productivity and how to improve it than our Chancellor does. Thank you.
Don't tempt me. Councillor Rivers. Councillor Rivers, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't hear you properly. Thank you, Leader. Let me summarise then. This is a good thing. My colleagues, I'm sure, will know that there's only one history book worth reading, and that is 1066 and all that. And in that book, you will no doubt know or can look up that there are 103 good things in history. And when this book comes up for revision, the Guildford and Waverley transformation and collaboration will be a candidate for a good thing 104. Bring it on.
Thank you, Councillor Rivers. Councillor Fairclough.
How do I beat that? Thank you, Leader. I do think it's important to understand that for many people, change is an uncomfortable word. They seek comfort in words like familiarity and phrases like, let's keep things as they are. But times have changed, and the way in which we work has changed, and quite certainly the way in which councils are funded has certainly changed. And to that extent, change has been forced upon us, and keeping things as they are simply isn't an option. I think this is a programme put forward by a forward-thinking coalition, one that has demonstrated that doing things differently really works, delivering more, delivering it more efficiently and more effectively. And to me, our collaboration with Guildford is simply another example of how doing things differently delivers real benefits for our officers, for our residents, for their residents. And yes, our understanding of Guildford finances has certainly changed since the start of the coalition, but the financial situation certainly hasn't. The numbers are still the same. What's changed is our understanding of the situation and indeed their understanding of the situation. And that to me is yet another benefit actually of the coalition. So I think change is a good thing and change is for the better in this respect.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fairclough. I'll now invite Councillor Keall to sum up and to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to all members for your comments. I do have sympathy with Councillor Spencer's views and I thank him for raising them. I hope that my opening remarks and the other detail within the report shows the importance of the other elements that we benefit from in this collaboration. Financial issues face all local authorities, as we all well know, and we do need to be safeguarding our ability to deliver services by having a sustainable budget, but it's not the only driver. I would like to draw attention to page 41 of the agenda, which shows the achievements to date of the collaboration, many of which are not financially based, and for the next steps of our work, which focus around co-location and a single shared officer structure, which of course will have financial benefits, but will have other more wide-reaching benefits too. So thank you for that opportunity to just come back on that, and I would like to move the recommendations in the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Keall. Members of Executive, when the voting buttons allow us to do so, please do cast your votes. That would appear to be unanimous. Peter and I managed to find the right button despite a sticker, so we're all good. Right, thank you everyone. Then we move on then to item 9, the General Fund MTFP mid-year review, and I ask Councillor Merriweather to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to read out the report in its entirety. It is for us to note. There's no substantive recommendation here, but overall, while this current year's General Fund budget remains broadly on target overall, inflation still dominates, and we still have a huge amount of work to do, including on measures like collaboration, to mitigate cost pressures and improve productivity over the medium-term forecast period. As noted in the autumn statement, inflation may be decelerating, but not nearly as fast as forecast. Those higher costs magnify our structural deficit and increase the sustainable measures we need to take to compensate now and in future years. One consequence of higher inflation is higher interest rates. And yes, we have benefited from higher rates received on our Treasury deposits, but that will disappear as rates fall even when costs don't. Meanwhile, the high interest rates we receive increase the hurdle that capital spending decisions need to pass, on top of the cost inflation and higher interest rates payable that they're additionally burdened with. Regardless of the impact of inflation and interest rates, we're also seeing increased demand for our services and a challenging labour supply market at any price. I'd like to thank the team for this update and wish them well over the coming weeks as we learn from the government, finally, typically late, what our spending powers for next year will look like and how we must budget accordingly. But in the meantime, I'll invite you to note the comments, the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Just to also add my thanks to the finance team. I spent a lot of time learning what core spending power meant last year, only to find that the definition is likely to be different this year. So it's very frustrating time, I think, for anybody either in finance or having to refer to any financial matters as we do. Are there any other speakers on the MTFP? Seeing none, in which case I'll move to the recommendations 1 through 3 on page 64 and could ask for a vote to be taken. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Moving now to item 10, the HRA mid-review, which is again back to Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. Not for long, because I'm going to hand over to Paul Rivers, but I've got very little to add in principle to the remarks I just made on the general fund. The same pressures, economic pressures and factors impact the HRA as they do the general fund. Once again, I'd like to thank the team for their incredibly hard work and for this update report, and hand over to Councillor Rivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, team. I've never been good at adding up, and I'm very impressed, very impressed. Colleagues, no decision is required, which is always a nice thing at this time. We are receiving this update based on the mid-year review of the HRA and capital budgets. The key threats we are facing, as Councillor Merriweather said, apply to the HRA business plan. They are inflation and interest rates. Whether government will bring in a cap on rent increases as they did last time, maybe, maybe not, we don't know. And whether changes to regulations and their associated costs of these changes, and I referred to the Social Housing Regulation Act, which received royal assent back in July. Will they have a significant impact? We will wait and see. It's always exciting in the HRA. Thank you, team, once again. Let's hope we have a nice, easy sail through this. Thank you.
And worth just flagging at this point the usual tension that we'll come to in the HRA, which comes to rent setting in the next few months, where reflecting on last year as a consequence of the cost of living and the government cap at 7%, we put rent up by 4%. That's something that we're going to have to process the consequences of this year. Obviously, inflation has reduced, but there is still inflation, and there are other cost pressures that go with that, particularly in regards to our HRA debt. So this is a clear tension, again, between making sure that rents are affordable for tenants, but also having enough money to build and maintain new properties. So I'm sure we'll be engaging with the Landlord Services Board over the course of the next few weeks and months, as we do each year on rent setting. Any comments further on this subject? Otherwise, I'll move the recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 on page 92, and if I could ask for a vote to be taken. And that is again unanimous. Item 11, covert investigation powers surveillance policy, which is one of the most severe sounding items on the agenda I think that's ever come across my desk. There are, of course, occasions where such powers have to be used by investigating officers in various capacities. There is, I think, at this point, a very clear need to try and align the policies of Guildford and Waverley, which is one of the first objectives of this particular policy. But it is also to make sure that such powers are exercised sparingly with proper knowledge of council and proper authority of officers, and to also ensure that if those powers are used, they are used properly in line with Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. The recommendations, I think, are fairly clear and straightforward, but if there are any other comments or questions, now is the time. Councillor Keall.
I just wanted to add, Leader, provided Guildford also approve this, there will be some consistency of both councils having an identical policy. This will benefit our employees in knowing where they stand, and it will put us in a strong position to support future decisions around collaborative working. So thank you.
Yeah, it's just worth reflecting that this and a number of other policies will enable it to be easier for Guildford and Waverley teams to work together or to do work at each other's council by following the same policies and protocols. It will make that easier in the long run. Any final comments before I move to the recommendations? Recommendations 2.1 to 2.3 on page 92. No, my apologies. I'm on the previous items recommendations. Bear with me. One moment. So these are, the executive is asked to consider the draft covert investigative powers policy and recommended that council approves the adoption of the policy. All those in favour, please show. And that is again unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Item 12, which is a growth bid regarding operational safeguarding, and I'll now move to Councillor Mirrlees to introduce.
Thank you, Leader. We have seen a significant increase in safeguarding concerns presenting amongst communities, and this is a result of a number of factors: the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, the cost of living crisis, the increased pressure on our statutory parties leading to higher thresholds of need to warrant partner involvement. These factors mean that safeguarding risks are held at local borough level without statutory intervention. To help the council with this increased pressure, a safeguarding coordinator role is requested to ensure clear reporting lines, governance of care, and management of risk to the individual and to the council. The reasons for this request are as follows. Due to the increase in safeguarding concerns for the most vulnerable residents and increased thresholds of need, we require a new dedicated resource to help this council to manage the associated risk. The role will support officers in coordinating safeguarding concerns and inquiries, keeping a clear audit trail of decisions and actions. And I have to say, we've also written to Surrey County Council to ask for financial assistance in this. Thank you.
I think we need to add an amendment to require that request for financial assistance. I think the process with this is that we intend to write to Surrey, but I think we're going to need to add a recommendation for to do so, is my understanding. And I'm very intent that we do add that point 4, because I think this is a very clear example of the county being squeezed in its financial envelope to the point that we are having to pick up elements of their work in a way that is somewhat problematic. So I will propose the addition of recommendation 4, which will write to Surrey County Council requesting appropriate remuneration / compensation, however, whatever the appropriate word would be, compensation. Appropriate support, financial support for this role, as they are effectively part of the reason why we're having to do it. Can I just have a seconder for the additional recommendation 4? Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Any further speakers on the 4 recommendations? In which case I'll now move to the vote on those recommendations. And that is again passed unanimously. Thank you. Item 13, homelessness prevention strategy, where I'm going to be confused, I'm sure, by a confluence of different rivers, starting this case with Councillor Rivers.
Well, that's very kind. Are you sure, Leader, that it is I that should be doing this rather than my colleague?
I think it probably is your colleague, and I'm reading my papers incorrectly. I apologise. But my apologies, even. Nick.
We look very similar, so I'd like to very much welcome the very detailed report from Michael Rivers, the relevant officer on the homelessness position. The strategy has been exceptionally successful up to now, including the successful bids and initiatives set out in section 2.1. It's particularly welcome that the council has been able, with our housing association partners, to develop 933 new homes in the last 5 years. We expect a further 72 homes for social and housing rent to become available in 23-24. I do, however, need to draw attention to the warning on page 245 that the government funding for the homelessness prevention grant is expected to fall from 623,000 to 346,000. That's a reduction of more than 40%. Without being too political, I hope that by then we will have a government that gives greater priority to housing and homelessness prevention. However, we do need in our forward planning to allow for the possibility that the 277 million reduction will come to pass. I hope that this progressive executive will continue to give the programme the funding that it needs to continue its success. But for now, I would like to ask our colleagues to approve the recommendation in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Yes, the government's stance on this does seem to be tough on homelessness, but not the causes of homelessness. And it is frankly a disgrace that they're considering some of the things that they are considering. And certainly as long as we're all here, I'm hoping that we will continue to make sure this homelessness strategy is as funded in the best way we possibly can. Any comments from any other members of the executive? Councillor Williams and then Councillor Rivers.
Yes, just to endorse the comments made by Councillor Palmer. I don't apologise for being political at this point. I mean, I think it is absolutely abhorrent to adopt the kind of attitude that's been adopted by the current government, exemplified by a statement by a former member of the government, but someone who is particularly, still particularly influential in that political party, and that is the comment that was made by Suella Braverman that homelessness is a life choice. I mean, to make a comment like that of any government minister or any ex-government minister is in my mind particularly abhorrent. And I know that we are going to face challenges over coming years with regard to the homelessness issue, but I'm confident that our officers will continue to address this issue in the best possible way under the constraints that we have.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rivers.
Thank you, Leader. Just very briefly, I have had the, I was going to say the fortune, is probably the misfortune to come across one specific case of homelessness in a family that I've known for 20 years. And I fully understand the difficulty and the efforts that our team goes in trying to sort these people out with good accommodation. They bring tender loving care in an area which it is not often there at all. Let me mention Jacob Pink. He's done an excellent job in Michael Rivers' team. And it's not just a short drop in and drop out. He's been following this case all the way along, and with any luck may have got a resolution to it. Well done to the whole team.
Yes, I'll echo that. Thanks to Mike Rivers and his team for all they do in this domain with a diminishing amount of resources and support from the government in this country. I'll now bring it to the recommendation, which is that the executive resolves to recommend to council the adoption and publication of the homelessness strategy. Can I have all those in favour please show when the lights flash? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Item 14, HRA new build housing delivery, which is also with Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose here is to ask the Executive to approve the continuing programme of new, genuinely affordable housing development, which I referred to in the previous point, specifically to facilitate the delivery of 46 new homes. The detailed proposals are set out in exempt, and colleagues will have had the opportunity to read them. I hope that we will agree to maintain the momentum of new development with these proposals.
Now I have got Councillor Hyman registered to speak. I'm just going to double check that he's not on the Zoom.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Hyman is not present.
Excellent. Okay, right. So any further speakers on the subject? Cannot stress how excellent this is to see some of these particular items go through, particularly Oxford Ridge Site F. I'm very happy to see that one through. I'm pleased to still be here for Site F, to be quite honest. It's a long time since I rocked up on Site D as a new councillor wondering what was going on. So excellent. So if there are no further speakers, I'll move the recommendations. So 2.1 is an overarching acceptance of the exempt annexes. 2.2 refers to Springfield Elstead. And 2.3 refers to Oxford Ridge Site F. Can I have all those in favour, please show electronically. And that one is unanimous. Also, item 15, housing delivery on Catchall Lane. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. This is a straightforward adjustment to a project previously approved on the 13th of December last year for 12 homes in Castle Lane at affordable rents. As set out in exempt, although there have been inflationary costs, which this allows for, the overall viability of the project has in fact improved further. I ask colleagues to approve it.
Thank you. Indeed, this is merely an adjustment to an already approved scheme. So can I have any further speakers on the subject before I move to the recommendations? No, in which case I'll move to the recommendations as set out on page 380 of the agenda pack. Can I have all those in favour, please show. And thank you all. That is again anonymous. And Councillor Palmer's final item, new build housing delivery at Whitley.
Thank you. This is to seek approval for the acquisition of 3 homes in Whitley for affordable rent. It's really important that we don't see the drive for affordability as only relating to our main settlements, our largest settlements, but also to the villages which form a significant part of the borough. Again, I seek the approval of the executive.
Thank you all. Extremely clear and straightforward recommendations. Any further speakers before I move it to a vote? No, in which case the recommendations are on pages 391 and 392 of the agenda pack. I have all those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is again unanimous. Item 17, exclusion of press and public. So that pursuant to procedural rule 20, in accordance with section 100A, paragraph 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the executive agrees that 1, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following matter on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the item, there would be a disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by section 100L of the Act and of the description specified in paragraphs 1 and 2 of the revised part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and 2, that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Can I have all those in favour of moving to exempt session, please show.